Good morning and welcome to the show. This is In Touch, and I am Beth Christie, your hostess. In Touch is our weekly half-hour public affairs show, which means at the end of the program today, if you are a member of a nonprofit group or organization here in the Hudson Valley, we'd love to have you on the show to talk about what is important to you, what your organization is doing here in the Hudson Valley. If you are a company and you are teaming up with a nonprofit group or organization, you are helping them either with development, membership, getting information out, we'd love to talk with you about that as well. So at the end of the program today, I'll give you a myriad of ways to get a hold of me, and so you can be on the show. This show is pre-recorded, and let me welcome. We are welcoming back old friends to the show and a new friend to the show, but a great organization. We're talking about the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie today. We have Walter Joseph, who is the executive director of the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie. So, Walt, thank you very much for your willingness once again to put yourself behind the microphone.
Good morning, and thanks. It's great to be back on the show.
It is very cool. And Dr. David Crenshaw is here. I just had the pleasure of meeting him today. He is a clinical director at the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie, and as I found out when we were talking, waiting for the studio to be open, he's also written 15 books. So, Dr. Crenshaw, it is very nice to have you on the show today.
I'm glad to be here.
This is every time, and we talked about this again before the mics were on, there's always so much going on at the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie, and I've said this time and time again. I think it is proof of the organization that you are constantly looking at what is happening in the real world in real time, as well as things that are beginning to happen and beginning to take notice of. And how does that impact our children, and how does that impact the community, and how can the Children's Home be there? It's constantly evolving. Otherwise, you wouldn't be around, 69 years. Otherwise, that's not happening if that organization is not built upon that principle. So yet again today, there's an awful lot to talk about.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in our society. And so as we have always done, we're trying to look to see where the emerging needs are and where the unmet needs are, and to try to do something about that. It's how we evolved from being an orphanage, the Poughkeepsie Orphan House and Home of the Friendless, to being the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie, which is now really a very clinically oriented treatment program for many youngsters.
Mm-hmm. I remember in past conversations, it used to be there were a lot more kids that were on campus. And then I remember, I don't remember how many years, the very first talking about the babies, the emergency, and how it was just a few. And then that grew. And then the demand for that grew.
And that's actually our largest program. That has 33 beds now.
Yeah.
And, we started out as an emergency placement for children who are abused or neglected and removed from their families by Child Protective Services in Dutchess County. Now we are really responding in Dutchess, Ulster, Putnam, and Orange County. So we are, we've reached out a little bit more regionally to meet the needs of the social service districts.
Wow. Goodness gracious. We talked about the fact that, just kind of a recap to bring us up to where you have been, you've had some events going on. Because, and I will be the one to say it, while yes, there is funding, the funding is never enough. It's not going to cover everything. No. And if you have an organization like the Children's Home of Poughkeepsie and how it is constantly evolving, that's where the support and the help of the community is so very, very important.
Yeah, and I think the economic crisis of 2008 we're still feeling it, because from our rates are set by the state of New York, and we have not had a cost of living. We've had one cost of living increase in the last 6 years.
Wow.
For targeted members of certain staff groups, the child care staff and some of the support people, which is fine. But the whole system has really been almost frozen for 6 years, and so we haven't emerged from the economic crisis yet. And even though everything is a bit more expensive, inflation rates have been very low, but still, things do increase in cost. So we are under more economic stress right now. We have this year we will have a larger deficit that we planned on. We were hoping to do a little bit better. Next year looks like another risky year financially for us. I mean, we'll be fine at the end of the day, but I think we're going to have to come up with more private money.
Gotcha. So one of the things that, speaking of private money, was your third annual cocktail concert. which was a success. That was at the Grandview, right?
Grandview, yeah, it was
Yeah.
a great show. We had over 200 people, so we finally broken that magic number. And we
Nice,
had
nice.
terrific. They took very, very good care of us at the Grandview. Brent and his crew really did a nice job with our hors d'oeuvres. And we had Chris Macchio, who was one of the New York tenors, performed, and he put on a great show. Great show.
Very cool. So, of course, there'll be plans. You guys are already working on the next one?
We're working on the next one. We actually have a date, which I will not say here. Because,
Okay, don't say that. No, no.
But we will be doing another one in April. So we're looking at, we started in February, I think. Actually, we started around Valentine's Day and had a snowstorm, and then we moved to March, and we had another one. So now we're in April.
Please don't let us have a snowstorm.
We're trying.
In April.
Yes, exactly. So we think April's pretty safe at the moment.
Okay, knock on wood.
Yes.
Let's not save the tape in case there is a blizzard next April.
Yeah.
We will not go back to this particular show because I'm always the one that jinxes the weather, just so you know.
but it's those events, they do two things for us. They, we make some money, which is great, which goes into the programming. And, we try to use that money for things that directly impact the kids. So these are the thrills around the edge. Recreation programs, art therapy programs. We're always looking, for grants for specific needs. Mm-hmm. And we build a lot of friendships, which is great. So, people, I like to think we're not quite as unknown as we were, 15 years ago, but right. We build up our list of friends, too.
Yeah.
So they're good from that perspective. And the show was terrific. The show was really great.
Yeah, because I think if people understand what an organization does and how important it is, so often you talk about, shop local, buy local, and give local. Mm-hmm. But if someone doesn't know all that an organization does, or just says, oh, well, that organization is completely funded. Mm-hmm. If they don't know that, then it may kind of be pushed aside. And so that's why I love having you guys on the program to talk about all that the organization does, how it's evolving. Like you said, you create more friends, people begin to know more and more, and then you see, well, you know what, maybe this can be where money from a PTA fundraiser goes. Maybe this is where what we do for our Christmas holiday. I mean, there's a lot of things. Yeah. Are
helping us. And, we've really changed. I think in probably the past 10 years has been a signature change for us is recognizing the role of trauma for our kids and the kind of experiences that they have had. And it's one of the things that Dr. Crenshaw has really done just an enormous job at the Children's Home to make us much more clinically aware of the role of trauma for our kids.
Thank you. That was my next question. That's what that's exactly where I was going to go, because Dr. Crenshaw, you have been quiet enough. I hope you enjoyed your break, because that's it. You're not getting any more for the rest of the program, so be prepared. When I introduced you and said you're clinical director of the Children's Home in Poughkeepsie and authored 15 books, and as Walt just talked about, childhood trauma, there was a phrase, Walt, that you had said before we came on air that said, instead of looking at a child and saying what's wrong with you, you say what's happened to you. Mm.
Yeah, because particularly experiences early in life that are traumatic, such as abuse or severe neglect, has a huge impact, not only in terms of the child's psychological development, but on their brain development. Because what we found through neuroscience research is that we arrive on this planet with a certain amount of the architecture of the brain in place, but connecting it up, the neural pathways and fibers and connective tissues that connect the different parts of the brain only develop properly if you have favorable attachment experiences. If you don't, if you miss out on that warm, loving, protective early experience with caretakers, then those pathways just don't develop adequately. And they can see this on neural imaging studies now, wow, where you can actually see that the connective pathways are just not well developed in those kids that had unfavorable early attachment experiences. So that means that they're not able to regulate their emotions properly, and that's a big issue for a lot of our kids at the children's home. They're easily triggered and activated, and they have a hard time modulating that, tampering down their emotional response once they get triggered. So that's something that can only be improved through positive interactions with adults. And that's what we emphasize. All of our staff, all of our volunteers, all of our students, all of our interns know that our primary tool is relational engagement with these kids. And the more positive interactions we can offer them during the course of the day, the more we're helping in terms of healthy brain development, as well as helping them to improve their emotional regulation and their relationships with other people. So it's pretty astounding to think that we're actually changing the brain.
That's what I was going to ask. That really is what happens when you say that they don't develop, but when you experience these on a consistent basis, that's positive, and with an adult, the connections begin to be made.
Yes. It takes time and it takes lots of repetitions, but it does happen. Wow. It is possible to make those changes, and what we've learned through neuroscience is that we're open to these kinds of changes all through our life. Even people in their 90s can make considerable, significant kinds of changes that are registered in the brain. New synapses, new networks, new connections are formed on the basis of experience. So if someone, let's say, who's a very lonely person in their elderly years makes new friendships and finds a place in the community where they feel a connection, then they have a much richer social, relational environment, and that affects the brain. That creates new connections, new wiring, new synapses, new networks. So that
very powerful.
Yes,
It's really
very powerful.
Yes, it's amazing. The one thing that we always have to remind our staff is that this is a process that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It takes a long time when those kids have missed those critical periods in development. But the good news is that we can provide those experiences, and it can still help them develop in a more healthy kind of way, brain-wise and in terms of emotional functioning and their relationships with others.
Wow. I know I've already said the word powerful. That seems to not even be enough, because in so many ways you give a life back to someone.
Yes.
You give them the tools, and also not just the tools, but also in their brain to be able to experience emotions and not have the emotions experience them.
Exactly.
If that's
not have the emotions take them over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we all have them. There's happiness. We all know those, and we all, I think we all know people, and ourselves too. We're all human beings. You can get kind of stuck in one, but to be able to give someone that you don't have to stay there.
It's interesting. Our own data really shows how this works, because we did a study of the high-risk behaviors that our children sometimes exhibit, usually the same behaviors that made it necessary for them to be placed at the children's home. Things like running away, attempting suicide, attempting to harm themselves, violent behavior, explosive rage, and loss of emotional control. And we found that after 9 months, between 9 and 12 months, the numbers of these incidents were drastically reduced. I mean, by half, really. In looking at that data carefully, we realized we weren't doing things all that differently at 9 months than we were at the first month, but we needed that much time to develop strong enough relationships with the kids that began to really impact them. Once we had those strong enough ties and relationships with the kids, those kinds of incidents just dramatically went down.
Yeah, and if I could just add something, it's very interesting that residential programs like ours are under pressure nationally to shorten how long kids are there because it's expensive, but we know that we need time to get these changes to operate. We don't want an endless amount of time because we also know from our data after about 12 months that we may see an increase in some of these behaviors. So, we try to move kids out within a year's time. That's kind of our goal. But it's the system is seeing residential as not a positive experience for kids, and in some cases it's not a positive experience. For really long-term residential, it's not great for kids. But the ability to have that child long enough to begin to make these changes is important, and I hope the regulators in the world, can recognize that there is an optimal length of treatment that should occur.
Well, and having the data, this isn't like, we think, as you mentioned, you can see it.
Right.
It is something that is measurable, that is scientific.
And it was across the board, all kinds of incidents, all the different kinds of high-risk behavior, without exception, were dramatically reduced at that point and continued to be at a low level from that point on.
Now, is this something in terms of talking of childhood trauma, is this something that people are really beginning to pay much more attention to? Because it's, I don't know how to say this, it's unfortunately, people have not been treating other people well for a long, long time. But is this something new in terms of being able to look at things, to be able to identify certain things that really are helping change and improve? Is that something recent?
Yeah, fairly recent. I would say in the last 10, 15 years in the mental health field, there's been a huge move towards trauma-informed care. More recently, it's begun to take hold in schools, so that schools are becoming more trauma-sensitive as well. The one place that has been very slow to change is the court system. The court system is not very trauma sensitive, and that's something that we've been advocating for and writing about and doing presentations to bring to the attention of the attorneys and the judges that the court system isn't really child friendly or sensitive to their needs at all. It's a very intimidating atmosphere, and it's really designed to, not deliberately, but unwittingly, to silence children, because children aren't going to be able to get up there in that unfriendly, intimidating environment and talk about the worst experiences of their life. But that's what they're expected to do.
Well, I remember going to court for a speeding ticket. I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest, and that wasn't the word. I'm not trying to. I'm just pointing out that that's intimidating.
Exactly.
I remember going, my parents are going to kill me. Like there are so many consequences to what is about to happen. That's such so much easier, and then. Some other experiences when you're in there with families and you're watching and there's emotions, and it's far more important. Yeah. It's far more significant. It is intimidating, and you worry about, what was said and what is said, and, did I explain it the right way? And then, of course, like you said, unwittingly, there's a prosecutor, there's a defense, and each of them have jobs. Roles that they are to play. They both want to win. So there are some tactics that are involved. And that I can't see that working well to allow a child to really be able to say what has happened to them. And then what happens when that child isn't able to say that?
Well,
And then the court, they don't believe them.
That's right.
That's adding something on top. That's another trauma on top of.
Exactly. When they're robbed of any sense of justice, that certainly can add to the original trauma, and many times the kids are deprived of a sense of justice because it's just not a venue that's conducive to their being able to disclose and share their trauma stories. Because it's the assumption is that by creating this tense adversarial environment in the courtroom, you're more likely to get at the truth. But that's only an assumption. There's no scientific evidence to back that whatsoever. But it's guided the court system throughout its history. But it's particularly not true with children, and there's data to support that children are more likely to share what's happened to them if you create a warm, friendly atmosphere and make a relationship with them and not put them under that kind of pressure. That's when they're able to disclose.
You allow them to breathe.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a layperson's term, but.
Yeah.
But, we had our experience with Rosie, who was the first dog in a courthouse here in Dutchess County, Judge Greller's court. And that was a really bold move on the part of the judge and the district attorney to take that risk. And I think there's some enlightenment here in the district attorney's office. They have their own dog now, a dog named Bosch. So they have embraced the notion that you have to support the trauma victim or the victim in these court proceedings. So, we made a little history with Rosie, and that was Dr. Crenshaw's project. We now have 2 dogs at the children's home because they're so good at comforting kids and helping them feel, grounded and settled. And it's that unconditional love of the dog, which these kids need. And I think the fact that the district attorney's office, gone ahead and gotten a dog for themselves to use in these, says something about recognizing this, that it doesn't have to be harsh and adversarial, that there's a support notion here for the witnesses.
I think this is an example when I asked, is it a relatively new field? And while you said it'd been like 10, 15 years, but to filter on down through all the different levels of society that it needs to before real change takes place takes a long time.
It does.
And I think that when you mentioned that, in schools are beginning to do that, I think that's why I feel that this is a relatively new. I always learn every time we do a show, forgetting that obviously there were years and years of this, way before that enables it to come down to where I kind of hang out.
But I think the trauma exposure years ago, and if you go back 20 years, was seen as almost like an excuse. In other words, you had a traumatic experience, therefore that became the person's excuse for doing what they did. I don't think the recognition was there. It's coming now that it actually changed your brain. It changed your relationship to society. It changed the way you think. So it's not just your mom was mean to you, therefore you X, Y, Z. Right. It's really, the state of New York has embraced this notion. They made trauma-sensitive care available to a number of agencies. We're one of the agencies that went through a sanctuary program, which we're probably 7 years or 8 years into, using sanctuary, which is about trauma and the role of trauma. Came out of something called the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, which looked at what happens to people who have traumatic experiences. It found some very dramatic results from that, which has driven the system, I think, very strongly to say we need to look at trauma histories for children, that trauma exposure. Dr. Crenshaw has done some work in our own with our own group about their trauma exposure, which, as you can imagine, is extremely high. Yeah. Maybe, Dave, if you talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, we just recently updated the ACEs study. And whereas in the national population of 17,000 people, only 12.5% had 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences. In our group, it was 93%.
At the children's home, yeah.
Oh.
And that was a threshold figure. That 4 really opened you up for all sorts of psychological and health problems, including longevity, diabetes. There were many
Cancer.
health problems related to exposure to childhood trauma, which I think people were not expecting to see that at all.
Wow.
Yeah, heart disease, lung cancer, diabetes, just a whole list of poor health outcomes for those who have 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences.
Oh.
So it puts people at risk for all kinds
For the rest
of
of their
things.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the rest of their life. And that's not even dealing with how they handle emotions and how they handle all those things. These are things that, for lack of a better word, are silent. You don't
Yeah.
even know that they are there.
That's right.
And that the risk is there.
That's right.
That's very powerful science. It's
Yeah.
very powerful research.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness gracious.
Yeah. It
Wow.
really puts in perspective what the kids are up against. You know, how many strikes are against them. And yet the other side of the coin is that we see remarkable resilience in these kids. That's one of the reasons I love working with them. They just have a spirit, a fighting spirit. They may not have anything else going for them. They may materially not have much in life. They may have little or no family resources. But they have that fighting spirit, something in them still worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And that's a beautiful thing. And that can't be taught.
Yeah,
That's there.
that's right.
Wow. You know what? I'm looking and it's 27 minutes. This goes too fast because this is a very, parts of this is heartbreaking when you hear this. And at the same time, though, you say, yes, but the positive is that the research is going to enable more and more and more children to be helped and more people to be helped to make an impact, to just really better take care of these children because you know more and therefore you can help more. And that to me is the amazing takeaway with this. I'm not often speechless, but I kind of am right now because it's so powerful.
I just would add one more provocative thought, and that is that Bruce Perry, who's done a lot of this research on neurobiology, feels that children in general today are growing up in relationally deprived environments because they spend on average 11 hours in front of some kind of screen, looking at TV or cell phones or smartphones or video games or whatever. And so they don't have the relational experience that is needed for the brain to develop in a healthy way.
Wow.
The kids at the children's home are at the extreme, of course, in terms of missing out on some of those favorable attachment experiences. But children in general growing up today are growing up in what he calls a relationally impoverished world.
Let me ask you this question. And we're going to go over, but we're just going to go over. I need to ask this one question. Dr. Crenshaw and Walt, is there or have you done workshops for people, for parents through schools to understand what this is? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we've
Before
done-
a child is in this situation, to understand.
Yeah, we have a real commitment to education. I think, we've got many interns come through the doors of the Children's Home from local colleges and colleges further away, and we're trying to share knowledge there. We actually did some training with the Hyde Park School District on sanctuary, and they did training with all of their staff last summer. Dr. Crenshaw has been our leader on a clinical seminar. I'll call it a clinical seminar that we have in the spring. We've had 3. We will do that every year if you want to mention something. But to bring the people who are really thinking about this and writing about this, amazingly insightful, bright people. We had Dr. Robert Brooks recently presented, did an astounding job. Dr. James Garbarino came last year and did an amazing, and we will do this again in the spring. Maybe we can come and talk about our plans for that.
Yeah,
before.
absolutely.
So because it's open to the public, there are CEUs available for the professionals who need to continue to work on this. We do student rates. So, we're really trying to reach out and bring this into our community.
Yeah, because I'm overusing the word powerful, and I know that, in an interview, you're not supposed to use the same word so many times over and over, but I can't think of another one. But just like you said, the trauma-sensitive care and, trauma-informed care. I mean, those phrases stay with me. And also, Dr. Crenshaw, as you mentioned, children in a relationally deprived environment, the tablets and the iPhones. And
It's a scary thought.
It
It's
is.
a very scary thought.
It is. And it's so easy to do. You're like, here, just kind of please look at this, and we get dinner or whatever, and just kind of look at it, and it all adds up. It all adds. Okay, we are totally so far over time right now.
You're going to be in so much trouble when they.
I am
going to
be in so much trouble, and I'm so okay. You guys are coming back. It's that simple.
Love to come back.
But
Thank you.
Closing comments, though, I do want to leave with closing comments. Dr. Crenshaw, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with folks this morning?
Well, there's a lot that we could be very discouraged about in when we do something like the ACEs study. But I would also really emphasize, and our recent conference was on resilience, the one that we had at the Grand Hotel with Dr. Robert Brooks. I would emphasize that kids have very innate self-reparative powers and capacities. And we're constantly at the Children's Home looking for how we can find these, what Dr. Brooks calls islands of competence in children, and trying to build on those. And I think any parent can do the same thing.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Walt, any closing comments?
Yeah, I would just like, the community is so important to us. Our children, we've talked about this in the past. Our kids go to the public school every day. They're in the community every day. I personally find the kids inspirational. They don't stand out in the school, although, some of our kids have some extraordinary problems at school. But I think the ability to integrate our kids into society and to have the support of the community, the support of the school district is enormously important for them. So from a relational perspective, they are relating to the community rather than being isolated from it. As in a lot of treatment centers, kids are not out there, but our kids are out there every day. And so, that I think that brings something special to the Children's Home.
Yeah.
So we thank the local community's been great to us.
Walt, what's a phone number and a website if people want more information, or maybe to find out how to donate or volunteer or to ask some other questions?
Okay, the phone number is 452-1420. So that's our main desk, and people can ask. They can talk to me. They can ask for Erin, who is our development person, who does a lot of the community events, and she's the point person for groups who might want to come in and do something. We have an enormous number of groups that have come in to do playgrounds, and that's a whole show there to talk about what they're doing. Our website is the 3Ws, children'shome.us. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll be debuting a new website with an upgraded look.
Nice.
So, but our history is there. Contact people are there.
Okay.
Something about the staff. The kind of work that we do is all there for people to see.
Great. Walt and Dr. Crenshaw, thank you so very much for taking the time to be
Love
here
to
today.
come here.
Our
Yeah,
pleasure.
thanks, Beth.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you for being here this morning. Hopefully there's something that you've learned, something that you can take away, something that can make a positive impact in your life. If you would like to be on the program and talk about what is important to you here in the Hudson Valley and Orange and Sullivan counties, here's how you can get a hold of me. Phone 845-471-1500. My extension is 159. Email is beth.christie@townsquaremedia.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, and yeah, I'm there. I'm way out there, so you can find me, and I hope that you do. Take care of yourself and those you love, and we'll see you right here next week.